There I was, standing outside the family restroom at Denver International Airport, my 3-year-old granddaughter Sophie tugging at my hand, tears streaming down her little face, when this woman, let's call her Karen, blocked the door with her designer purse and looked me dead in the eye. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with entitlement. "I was here first, and I have priority. You'll just have to wait." I stared at her in disbelief. My granddaughter was practically dancing from foot to foot, and this woman, who was clearly traveling alone with no children in sight, was claiming she had more right to the family restroom than an actual grandmother with a desperate 3-year-old. But here's the thing about being 67 years old and having raised 4 kids of my own: you develop a sixth sense for people who think the world revolves around them. And something about this woman's cocky smile told me she wasn't even supposed to be using that restroom in the first place. That's when I decided to teach her a lesson she'd never forget. Let me back up and tell you how this whole mess started. My name is Margaret, and I've been flying for over 40 years. Back in my day, air travel meant something. People dressed up, showed courtesy, and understood that we're all in this together when we're 30,000 feet in the air. These days, well, let's just say common decency seems to be as extinct as complimentary meals in coach. I was at Denver Airport that Tuesday morning because my daughter Lisa had called me in tears the night before. Her husband Mike had been deployed overseas again, and she was drowning trying to manage 2 kids under 5 while working full-time as a nurse. Sophie, my youngest granddaughter, had been having potty training setbacks since Daddy left, and Lisa was at her wits' end. "Mom," she'd sobbed into the phone, "I know it's short notice, but could you possibly come stay for a week? I just need some backup." Of course I said yes. That's what grandmothers do. The flight from Phoenix to Denver had been delayed by 2 hours due to weather, and by the time we landed, my arthritic knees were screaming and Sophie was cranky from the long journey. She'd been such a trooper on the plane, entertaining herself with coloring books and asking me to read Goodnight Moon approximately 17 times. But now she was tired, overwhelmed, and making that face every parent and grandparent knows, the one that means you have exactly 90 seconds to find a bathroom or there's going to be an accident. I'd been traveling with grandchildren long enough to know the drill. The family restrooms at airports are a godsend when you're dealing with small children. They're spacious enough for luggage, have changing tables, and most importantly, they lock. No trying to squeeze into a regular stall while juggling a toddler and carry-on bags. No worrying about other passengers huffing and puffing while a 3-year-old takes her time. As we made our way through the terminal, Sophie's grip on my hand got tighter and tighter. "Grandma Maggie," she whispered, using the name she'd given me when she first started talking, "I really need to go potty." "I know, sweetheart," I said, scanning the signs for the nearest restroom. "We're almost there." That's when I spotted the family restroom sign, and my heart lifted. We were going to make it. But as we approached, I noticed her. The woman was probably in her early 40s, with perfectly styled blonde hair that screamed I spent $200 on this blowout, designer clothes that still had the subtle sheen of newness, and the kind of oversized sunglasses that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She was pacing back and forth in front of the family restroom door like a caged animal, checking her phone obsessively and muttering under her breath. No children in sight, no diaper bag, no stroller. Just her, a designer handbag that probably cost more than my car payment, and an attitude that could have powered the entire terminal. I should have known right then that this wasn't going to end well. "Excuse me," I said politely as we approached. Sophie was now doing the universal toddler pee-pee dance, shifting her weight from foot to foot. "Is the restroom occupied?" The woman looked up from her phone with the kind of expression you'd give someone who just interrupted you during brain surgery. "Obviously," she snapped. "I've been waiting here for 10 minutes. Something about her tone rubbed me the wrong way, but I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was having a bad day. Maybe she was stressed about her flight. God knows airports bring out the worst in people. "Oh, okay," I said, trying to keep my voice cheerful for Sophie's sake. "We'll wait too then." That's when she gave me the look. You know, the one I'm talking about, the slow up and down assessment that says I'm better than you and we both know it. Her eyes lingered on my comfortable traveling shoes, my well-worn cardigan, and my sensible carry-on bag that I'd had since Sophie's mom was in diapers. "Actually," she said, shifting her designer purse to block our path more effectively, "I think you should find another restroom. This one is, well, it's not really appropriate for just anyone to use." I felt my eyebrows shoot up to my hairline. I'm sorry? The family restroom, she continued, as if speaking to a particularly slow child, is for people with special circumstances. Important circumstances. I have a connection to catch, and I can't risk using the regular restroom where there might be complications. Sophie tugged on my hand again. Grandma Maggie, please, she whispered, and I could hear the desperation in her voice. That's when my grandmother instincts kicked into high gear. This woman was not only being unreasonable, she was doing it in front of my granddaughter, who was clearly in distress. The mama bear in me that had protected 4 children and now 7 grandchildren was starting to wake up. Ma'am, I said, and those who know me well would recognize the particular tone I use when I'm trying very hard to remain civilized. I have a 3-year-old here who really needs to use the restroom. The family restroom is specifically designed for situations like this. She actually laughed, and it was the kind of sound that could curdle milk. Honey, I don't think you understand how this works. I'm a premium passenger. I fly first class. I have status with this airline, and frankly, I have more right to convenience than some random grandmother with her. She paused and looked down at Sophie with barely concealed disdain. Sticky child. Did she just call my granddaughter sticky? I felt my blood pressure rise, and it had nothing to do with the altitude. Sophie wasn't sticky, she was tired and scared and needed to use the bathroom. She was a perfectly normal 3-year-old who'd been cooped up on an airplane for 4 hours and was now being stared at by a woman who clearly thought children were some sort of inconvenient accessory. Listen, I said, trying one more time to appeal to whatever humanity might be lurking beneath that perfectly applied makeup. She's just a little girl, and I'm sure there are plenty of other restrooms in this terminal that would be perfectly adequate for your needs, she interrupted, checking her phone again. I'm expecting an important call, and I need privacy and quiet. Children are disruptive. That's when I heard a small sniffle beside me. Sophie was looking up at the woman with wide eyes, trying to understand why this strange lady was being mean to her grandma Maggie. My heart broke a little seeing that confused expression on her sweet face. And that's when I noticed something that made my blood boil even further. The family restroom door was slightly ajar. Had been the whole time. It was empty. Ma'am, I said, and now my voice had that edge that my children knew meant business. That restroom is empty. It has been the entire time we've been standing here. She had the grace to look slightly embarrassed for about half a second before doubling down. Well, yes, but I was here first, and I'm going to use it as soon as I finish this important business call. What business call? I asked. You haven't answered your phone once. Her face flushed red beneath her foundation. That's none of your concern. The point is, I have priority here, and you need to find somewhere else to take your child. Sophie chose that moment to whisper, Grandma, I can't wait much longer. That did it. 47 years of motherhood and grandmotherhood kicked in, along with the accumulated wisdom of dealing with playground bullies, entitled PTA presidents, and every variety of human being who thinks their needs matter more than everyone else's. I stepped forward, gently moved past her designer barricade, and pushed open the family restroom door. Sophie, sweetie, go ahead, I said. That's when Karen, because of course her name was Karen, completely lost her mind. How dare you, she shrieked, loud enough to attract the attention of everyone within a 50-foot radius. I told you I was using this restroom. This is assault. This is discrimination. I'm going to have you arrested. She actually reached out and grabbed my arm. Big mistake. I may be 67, but I raised 4 kids in the 1980s and 90s when helicopter parenting wasn't a thing and mothers had to be tough. I've broken up teenage parties, stared down school principals, and once physically removed a drunk coach from my son's little league game. I don't intimidate easily. Ma'am, I said, gently but firmly removing her hand from my arm, you need to step back. My granddaughter needs to use the restroom. This is a family restroom, and we are a family. If you continue to prevent a child from using the facilities, I'm going to call airport security. Security? She laughed, but it was getting more hysterical now. I'm calling security on you. Do you know who I am? And there it was, the classic Karen line. Do you know who I am? No, I said calmly, and I don't particularly care. What I care about is my granddaughter, who needs to use this restroom right now. That's when she made her biggest mistake yet. She pulled out her phone and started dialing. Yes, I need security at Terminal B, near gate 37. There's a woman here assaulting me and preventing me from using the restroom. She's with some child, and they're both being very aggressive and disruptive. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was actually calling security and lying about what was happening. But two could play that game. I pulled out my own phone and did something I'd learned from my tech-savvy grandson. I started recording. For the record, I said clearly, making sure my phone captured both of us, this is what's actually happening. I am here with my 3-year-old granddaughter, who needs to use the family restroom. This woman has been blocking access to an empty family restroom for over 15 minutes, despite having no children with her and no apparent need for the specialized facilities. Karen's eyes went wide when she realized what I was doing. Stop recording me. You can't record me without my permission. Actually, said a voice behind us, in a public space like an airport, she absolutely can. We both turned to see a TSA agent approaching, along with an airport security officer. Apparently, Karen's phone call had worked just not the way she'd intended. What seems to be the problem here? The security officer asked. Karen immediately launched into a dramatic retelling of events that bore absolutely no resemblance to reality. According to her version, I had physically assaulted her, used threatening language, and was preventing her from accessing facilities she had legitimately reserved. Reserved? I looked at the security officer, who seemed as confused as I was. Ma'am, he said to Karen, you can't reserve a public restroom. These facilities are first come, first served. But I'm a first-class passenger. She protested. I have elite status. I specifically requested access to premium facilities. That's when the TSA agent stepped forward with a puzzled expression. Ma'am, what's your flight number? Karen rattled off a flight number, and I watched as the agent checked something on her tablet. I'm sorry, ma'am, but according to our records, you're not on that flight. In fact, you're not on any flight departing from this terminal today. The color drained from Karen's face. There must be some mistake, she stammered. Let me see your boarding pass, the security officer requested. And that's when the truth came out. Karen fumbled through her designer purse for what felt like an eternity before finally producing what looked like a boarding pass. The security officer examined it, frowned, and showed it to the TSA agent. Ma'am, he said slowly, this boarding pass is for a flight that departed yesterday. From Atlanta. The silence that followed was deafening. There must be some confusion. Karen tried to backtrack, but the jig was up. Ma'am, are you currently a passenger at this airport? The TSA agent asked. More fumbling, more stammering, and finally, the truth. It turned out that Karen wasn't flying anywhere. She had come to the airport to pick up a friend whose flight had been cancelled the night before, though apparently no one had bothered to tell Karen. She'd been wandering around the terminal for hours, using the expensive restaurants and shops like her personal country club, because she liked the atmosphere and thought airport lounges were more sophisticated than regular coffee shops. She'd been camping out by the family restroom because, in her words, it was quieter and more private than the regular restrooms, and I needed somewhere to make some important phone calls. The security officer's expression shifted from confused to annoyed. Ma'am, you're aware that you can't just hang out in an airport if you're not a passenger, right? And you definitely can't block access to facilities that are meant for traveling families. I felt a surge of vindication so strong it was almost dizzying. Here I'd been, thinking I was dealing with an entitled passenger who thought her first-class ticket gave her special bathroom privileges. Instead, I'd been dealing with someone who wasn't even supposed to be in the terminal at all. So let me get this straight, I said, unable to keep a note of satisfaction out of my voice. You've been preventing my granddaughter from using a family restroom because you think you're too good for the regular facilities, but you're not even a passenger? Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The TSA agent turned to me with an apologetic smile. Ma'am, I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. Please, go ahead and use the restroom with your granddaughter. Thank you, I said, then looked down at Sophie, who had been watching this entire exchange with the wide-eyed fascination that only small children can muster. Come on, sweetheart, let's get you taken care of. As we headed toward the restroom door, I heard the security officer speaking to Karen in that polite but firm tone that meant business. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me. We need to verify your reason for being in the terminal and make sure you have legitimate business here. But I was just trying to. Karen began. Ma'am, You've been asked to stop blocking access to public facilities. You've made false claims about being a passenger. And you've wasted airport security resources with a fraudulent complaint. We need to have a conversation. I paused at the restroom door and turned back to see Karen being escorted away, her designer purse clutched to her chest and her face red with embarrassment. The small crowd that had gathered to watch the drama was now murmuring among themselves, and I caught phrases like "not even a passenger" and "blocking a little kid from the bathroom." Sweet, sweet justice. As Sophie and I finally entered the family restroom, which was, as I'd suspected, perfectly clean and available, she looked up at me with those big brown eyes that reminded me so much of her mother at that age. "Grandma Maggie," she said solemnly, "that lady was being mean." Yes, sweetie, she was. But sometimes when people are mean, other people step in to help make things right. That's what those nice security officers did. Are you going to tell Mommy about the mean lady? I thought about it for a moment. Lisa was already stressed enough without hearing about airport drama. Maybe when you're older, I'll tell you the whole story. But for now, let's just focus on getting you cleaned up and on our way to see Mommy. As I helped Sophie wash her hands, I caught my reflection in the mirror. There I was, gray-haired, laugh-lined, wearing my comfortable traveling clothes and my 20-year-old cardigan, and I was smiling. Not just because justice had been served, but because I'd stood up for what was right. I'd protected my granddaughter from someone who thought her designer accessories made her more important than a 3-year-old's basic needs. In a world that sometimes feels like it's designed to favor the loudest, rudest, most entitled voices, sometimes it's the quiet grandmothers who end up saving the day. When we emerged from the restroom, the hallway was back to normal. No Karen, no security officers, just the usual flow of travelers hurrying to catch flights or meet loved ones. A few people nodded at me with knowing smiles. Word travels fast in airports, and apparently, our little drama had already become terminal gossip. As we walked toward the exit, Sophie skipping beside me now that she was comfortable again, a woman about my age stopped me. "Excuse me," she said with a warm smile. I couldn't help but overhear what happened back there. "I just wanted to say thank you for standing up to that woman. I've been flying with grandchildren for years, and I've run into people like that before. It takes guts to push back." "It takes a grandmother," I replied, and we both laughed. The drive to Lisa's house gave me time to reflect on what had happened. In the space of 20 minutes, I'd gone from being a frustrated grandmother dealing with an entitled stranger to being the hero of my own small story. I'd learned that Karen wasn't even supposed to be in the terminal. I'd captured the whole thing on video, which I was definitely going to show my tech-savvy grandson later, and I'd managed to teach both Sophie and myself a valuable lesson about standing up for what's right. But the best part? The absolute best part was walking into Lisa's house and watching Sophie run into her mother's arms with a story to tell. "Mommy, Grandma Maggie was so brave. There was a mean lady at the airport who didn't want me to use the potty, but Grandma Maggie made her go away." Lisa looked at me with raised eyebrows, and I just shrugged. "Long story," I said. "I'll tell you later." But as I tucked Sophie into bed that night and she asked me to read Goodnight Moon one more time, she looked up at me with those serious 3-year-old eyes and said, "Grandma Maggie, you're like a superhero." And you know what? For those 20 minutes in the Denver airport, standing up to an entitled woman who thought her designer purse gave her more rights than a little girl with a full bladder, maybe I was. The next morning, Lisa showed me an article that had popped up on a local Facebook group, "Airport Karen Exposed. Woman who blocked family restroom wasn't even a passenger." Apparently, someone else had been recording the incident too, and the video had gone viral in the Denver airport community. I never did find out what happened to Karen after security escorted her away, but I'd like to think she learned something that day. Maybe she realized that being rude to grandmothers and their grandchildren isn't just wrong, it's also a really good way to end up on the wrong side of airport security. And me? I learned that sometimes the best stories come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes standing up for what's right means you end up with a tale worth telling. And sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys, or in this case, the good grandmothers, really do win. As I always tell my grandchildren, kindness is free, but rudeness comes with a price. Karen paid that price in front of a terminal full of strangers, while a 3-year-old learned that her Grandma Maggie would always fight for her, no matter what. But the story doesn't end there. Oh no, it gets so much better. 3 days into my stay at Lisa's house, I was helping Sophie with her afternoon snack when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a Denver area code I didn't recognize. Mrs. Henderson? The voice was professional, friendly. This is Jennifer Martinez from Channel 9 News in Denver. We received a video of an incident at Denver International Airport earlier this week, and we'd love to speak with you about it. My heart skipped a beat. A video? Yes, ma'am. It shows you standing up to a woman who was inappropriately blocking access to a family restroom. The video has been shared over 50,000 times on social media, and we think our viewers would love to hear your side of the story. 50,000 times? I nearly dropped the phone. It turned out that the gentleman who'd been standing behind us in line, a businessman named David who'd been traveling with his own young daughter, had recorded the entire incident. Unlike my shaky phone footage, his was crystal clear, capturing every moment from Karen's initial refusal to let us use the restroom to her being escorted away by security. The video has really struck a chord, Jennifer explained. People are calling you the grandmother hero, and saying you represent everything good about standing up to entitled behavior. Would you be willing to do a short interview? Lisa was bouncing up and down in the kitchen, mouthing "say yes. Say yes," like she was 12 years old again. So I said yes. The interview aired that Friday during the evening news, and let me tell you, I was not prepared for what happened next. Within hours of the broadcast, my phone was ringing non-stop. Friends I hadn't heard from in years were calling to say they'd seen me on TV. My church group was buzzing. Even my neighbor's daughter in California had seen the clip online and called her mother to ask if that was Mrs. Henderson from next door. But the real surprise came in my email inbox. The viral aftermath. Lisa had helped me set up an email account years ago, which I mostly used to receive photos of the grandchildren and the occasional recipe from my sister. But that weekend, I had over 300 emails from complete strangers. The messages were incredible. Grandmothers from across the country sharing their own stories of entitled people in airports, stores, and restaurants. Parents thanking me for showing their children that sometimes adults need to stand up for what's right. Even some flight attendants and airport workers reached out to say that what I did was exactly what they wished more people would do. One email particularly touched my heart. It was from a woman named Patricia in Ohio. Dear Mrs. Henderson, I saw your interview on the news and it made me cry happy tears. Last month, I was traveling with my autistic grandson, and a woman at the gate made cruel comments about his behavior. I was so embarrassed and upset that I didn't say anything. Watching you stand up to that entitled woman gives me hope that next time, I'll find the courage to speak up. Thank you for showing us that being kind doesn't mean being a pushover. Reading that message, sitting in Lisa's kitchen with Sophie coloring at the table beside me, I realized something important. This wasn't just about one rude woman at an airport anymore. It had become something bigger, a reminder that everyday people can make a difference just by refusing to let bad behavior slide. But the story was far from over. The unexpected encounter. 2 weeks later, I was back home in Phoenix, grocery shopping at my usual Fry's, when I heard a familiar voice behind me in the produce section. Excuse me, aren't you the woman from the airport video? I turned around to find a young woman in her 30s, probably around my daughter Lisa's age, with kind eyes and a genuine smile. I'm sorry to bother you, she continued, but I had to say something. I'm a single mom, and I travel with my 6-year-old son a lot to visit his father. I've run into so many people like that woman in the airport, people who act like children or just inconveniences to be dealt with. Seeing you stand up for your granddaughter, it gave me permission to stand up for my son too. She told me about an incident the previous week where a man at a restaurant had loudly complained that her son was too noisy while eating his dinner. Instead of shrinking away like she normally would have, she'd politely but firmly told the man that her child was behaving appropriately and if he wanted absolute quiet, he should consider ordering room service instead. The manager actually backed me up, she said with a huge grin. And you know what? My son saw me stand up for him. That matters. We chatted for a few more minutes about parenting and grandparenting, and as she walked away, I realized something wonderful was happening. The video wasn't just entertaining people, it was inspiring them to find their own voices. The corporate response. But perhaps the most surprising development came a month later, in the form of an official letter from Denver International Airport. The airport's customer service department had apparently received hundreds of emails and comments about the incident. Most were supportive of my actions, but they'd also received complaints from travelers who felt that airport security should have handled the situation differently. The letter, signed by the airport's director of operations, was fascinating. Dear Mrs. Henderson, we wanted to personally thank you for bringing attention to an ongoing issue at our facility. Your experience has prompted us to review our policies regarding non-passengers in secure areas and the appropriate use of family facilities. As a result of the incident and subsequent public response, we have implemented new signage making it clear that family restrooms are reserved for travelers with children, and we have increased security patrols to ensure these policies are enforced. We would like to invite you and your family to be our guests on your next trip through Denver International Airport, including access to our United Club Lounge regardless of your ticket class. Lisa laughed so hard when I read her the letter that she nearly choked on her coffee. Mom, you're getting VIP treatment at airports now. You've become a traveling celebrity. But the real validation came in the form of a follow-up call from Jennifer Martinez at Channel 9. Mrs. Henderson, she said, I wanted to let you know that we've received word about what happened to the woman from the airport, the one who was blocking the restroom. My ears perked up. After all this time, I'd wondered what had become of Karen. According to our sources at airport security, she was issued a citation for creating a public disturbance and was banned from Denver International Airport for 6 months. But here's the interesting part, it turns out she's done this before. What Jennifer told me next was both shocking and oddly satisfying. Karen's history revealed. It turned out that Karen, whose real name was Brenda Whitmore, had a history of causing scenes at Denver International Airport. She'd been using the airport as her personal hangout space for over 2 years, taking advantage of the free Wi-Fi, expensive coffee shops, and upscale atmosphere without actually flying anywhere. She'd been warned multiple times by security for loitering, but this was the first time she'd actively prevented other passengers from using airport facilities. The video of our encounter had provided the evidence airport security needed to finally take action. But here's the best part, Jennifer continued. After the video went viral, several other people came forward with their own stories about encounters with her. Apparently, she's been pulling this more important than you routine all over Denver at high-end hotels, exclusive restaurants, even at the mall. She seems to think that acting entitled will get her better treatment. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to make herself seem more important than a grandmother and a 3-year-old, Karen had ended up exposing herself to the entire internet as someone who wasn't important enough to actually have anywhere to go. There's more, Jennifer said. The friend she was supposedly picking up? Turns out that person doesn't exist. According to airport records, she's been using that story for months as an excuse to hang around the terminal. So not only had Karen been lying about being a passenger, she'd been lying about why she was there in the first place. She'd just been using the airport as her personal country club, complete with premium bathroom facilities that she felt entitled to monopolize. The ripple effect continues. As the months went by, I started noticing something wonderful happening in my own community. The video had inspired people not just to stand up to entitled behavior, but to be more thoughtful about their own actions. My neighbor Carol told me about choosing to give up her seat on a crowded bus to a tired-looking mother with a baby, something she admitted she might not have done before seeing my story. My pastor mentioned that the video had sparked several conversations in our congregation about how we treat service workers and fellow travelers. Even Sophie, now 4 and with a much better grasp of language, would occasionally reference the mean airport lady when talking about fairness and kindness. Grandma Maggie, she said during one of our coloring sessions, remember when that lady was being mean and you made her go away? I didn't make her go away, sweetie. She made herself go away by not being kind. But you stood up for me, she said matter-of-factly, focused intently on staying inside the lines of her picture. That's what families do. Out of the mouths of babes. A year later, almost to the day, I found myself back at Denver International Airport. Lisa's husband Mike was coming home from deployment, and the whole family was making the trip to welcome him back. The excitement in the air was palpable. Sophie had been counting down the days on her little princess calendar, and even baby James seemed to sense something special was happening, babbling more than usual and flashing his gummy smile at everyone who passed by. The airport felt different this time. Maybe it was because I was no longer just another anonymous grandmother navigating the chaos with a cranky toddler. Maybe it was because instead of rushing to catch a connection, we were here for pure joy to welcome home a soldier, a father, a husband who'd been gone for 8 long months serving our country overseas. As we walked through the terminal, Sophie, now a confident 4-year-old with pigtails bouncing, and her baby brother James riding contentedly in his stroller, I found myself taking in details I'd missed during that stressful day a year ago. The way the morning light streamed through those massive windows, casting geometric patterns across the polished floors. The mixture of languages floating through the air as travelers from around the world crossed paths in this temporary shared space. The smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls from the nearby CAF, where Sophie was already eyeing the display case with intense 4-year-old focus. But it was when we passed the family restroom near gate 37 that the memories came flooding back. I couldn't help but smile when I saw it, that same door where so much drama had unfolded exactly 367 days ago. The same location where I'd learned that sometimes standing up for what's right means you have to be willing to look foolish, or confrontational, or pushy. Where I'd discovered that being a grandmother means being a warrior when necessary, even if your weapons are nothing more than common sense and moral conviction. There was new signage, just as the airport had promised in their letter. Clear, bold letters that read, "Family restroom for use by passengers traveling with children under 12 or passengers requiring assistance." Below that, in smaller print, it added, "This facility is monitored by security cameras. Misuse may result in citation and removal from the premises." I had to chuckle at that last line. Someone had definitely learned their lesson about entitled airport loiterers. "Mommy," Sophie announced loudly, tugging on Lisa's sleeve and pointing dramatically at the restroom door. "This is where Grandma Maggie was famous." Several nearby travelers turned to look, and I watched with a mixture of embarrassment and amusement as recognition dawned on a couple of faces. There was a woman about my age who tilted her head and squinted at me with that "I know you from somewhere" expression. A businessman in an expensive suit actually paused mid-phone call and stared. Someone, a younger woman with a baby carrier strapped to her chest, actually pulled out their phone, probably to take a picture or video, but I just smiled and waved. After a year of unexpected fame, I'd gotten used to being recognized occasionally, though it still felt surreal. Lisa was trying to shush Sophie, her cheeks pink with that particular shade of embarrassment that daughters feel when their children broadcast family business to strangers. "Sophie, honey," inside voice, "remember?" But Sophie was having none of it. At 4, she understood that something important had happened in this exact spot, and she was proud of her Grandma Maggie in the way that only small children can be proud, completely, loudly, and without any social filters whatsoever. "That's my grandma who was on TV," she continued, now addressing a family with 2 school-aged children who were clearly eavesdropping. "She made a mean lady go away because the mean lady wouldn't let me use the potty." The mother of that family smiled at me with genuine warmth. "Are you really the grandmother from the viral video?" she asked. "My mother-in-law sent me that clip about 6 months ago. She said it gave her hope that there were still people willing to stand up for what's right." I felt that familiar flush of pride mixed with bewilderment that had become my standard response to recognition. That would be me, I admitted. Though I have to say, I never expected standing up to one rude person would turn into such a big deal. "Sometimes the small things are the big things," the woman replied, and something about the way she said it made me think she might have had her own encounters with entitled airport Karens. As we continued toward Mike's gate, I found myself walking a little taller. Not because of the recognition, though I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel nice, but because of what that recognition represented. It meant that somewhere out there, people were still paying attention to kindness. Still celebrating when someone chose to do the right thing instead of the easy thing. Still believing that ordinary people could make extraordinary differences just by refusing to let bad behavior slide. The gate area was packed with families waiting for the military transport flight. There's something special about homecoming flights and energy that's different from regular commercial travel. Children holding hand-drawn "Welcome Home Daddy" signs. Wives checking their makeup for the 10th time in 5 minutes. Elderly parents clutching tissues and trying not to cry before the tears were supposed to start. Sophie immediately spotted another little girl about her age holding a sign covered in glittery star stickers. Within minutes, they were best friends, comparing their artwork and chattering about how long their daddies had been gone. James, meanwhile, had charmed an elderly gentleman in a veteran's cap who was making increasingly elaborate faces at him from across the aisle. But the real surprise came as we were boarding our flight home 3 hours later, our hearts full from watching Mike sweep Lisa into his arms while Sophie squealed "Daddy, Daddy," and climbed up his legs like a tiny koala. "Excuse me," said the gate agent, a young man with a friendly smile and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Are you Mrs. Henderson? The grandmother from the viral video?" I paused in the boarding line, Sophie's hand in one of mine and my carry-on bag in the other. When I admitted that yes, I was, his smile got even bigger, transforming his entire face. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said, his voice carrying a sincerity that caught me off guard. "That video has been part of our customer service training for the past 6 months. We show it to new employees as an example of how everyday people can help make airports better places for everyone. Your story reminds our staff that we're not just processing passengers, we're helping families." He paused, glancing around to make sure his supervisor wasn't within earshot, then leaned in slightly. "Between you and me, we've had 3 incidents this year where people tried to pull the same stunt as that woman camping out in family restrooms when they weren't even passengers. Every single time, other travelers stepped in and said something, just like you did. One person even quoted your video directly, saying, 'Ma'am, this is a family restroom for actual families.' We think your example gave people permission to speak up." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. The idea that my moment of frustration and protective anger had somehow given other people the courage to stand up for what's right, it was more than I'd ever hoped for. "That means more to me than you know," I told him truthfully. As we finally settled into our seats for the flight home, Sophie curled up against me with her travel coloring book, the same worn copy of Princesses and Ponies that she'd been working on for months. The familiar weight of her small body against my side, the sweet smell of her strawberry shampoo, the way she absently hummed while she colored, these were the moments that made everything else worth it. "Grandma Maggie," she said sleepily, her eyelids already growing heavy from the excitement of the day, "tell me the story about the mean airport lady again." And so I did, one more time, though as always, I focused more on the parts about kindness winning and families sticking together than on the confrontation itself. I told her about how sometimes grown-ups forget how to share and be nice, and how sometimes other grown-ups have to remind them. I told her about how standing up for people you love is one of the most important things you can do, even when it's scary or uncomfortable. As the plane lifted off and Denver grew smaller below us, the Rocky Mountains spreading out like a rumpled quilt in the afternoon sun, I reflected on how one moment of standing up for what's right had rippled out into something much larger than I ever could have imagined. Sometimes the smallest acts of courage, standing up to a bully, protecting a child, refusing to let bad behavior slide, can touch more lives than we'll ever know. And sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys really do win. But more importantly, sometimes the good guys inspire other people to be good guys too. And that, I think, is the real victory.